It seems like every time an author is mentioned, the fact that they're a New York Times best-selling author usually comes afterwards. But how are so many people that good at writing books? Of course there's people that are amazing at it, like Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, and that turf bitch J.K. Rowling, who, by the way, based on the New York Times bestseller list, is a less successful writer than Jeff Kinney, the guy who wrote the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. But even then, what does that mean? To be a New York Times best-selling author, what do you have to do? Well, most obviously, you have to get onto the list. Now, there's more than just one list. There ends up being 11 weekly lists that the New York Times will post on a Wednesday night, and they also do monthly lists too. That means that every year, there is a chance for a total of 6,040 books to be featured, which also means that there's a chance for 6,040 authors to become bestsellers, which immediately seems like too many. In saying that though, apparently there are more than 3 million books published every year, which makes getting onto the list super competitive. The bestseller lists break down into 11 different categories, like fiction, non-fiction, dieting, like just all of that crap. But what ends up happening is that the categories will either be broad or like just non-specific, to the point where the same book can pop up on multiple different categories. Like for example, even this week's list, almost every single book is shown on more than one list. So the idea of even like 6,000 authors being featured doesn't seem like something that does happen. Originally, the list started back in 1931 and only reported on the books selling the best in New York City itself. Over time, the popularity of the list grew and it ended up expanding to cover the whole of the US. The way the New York Times describes the list is authoritatively ranked lists of books sold in the United States, sorted by format and that's good enough, we're going with that. But ever since the list was created, people never knew for sure how accurate they really were at picking the best-selling books. And the reason for this is because outside of the team of 3 that curate this list, no one knows for sure how the books are selected. And their reasoning for keeping the selection process to themselves is to circumvent potential pressure, meaning to stop people cheating the system. In an article written by one of the members of this group talking about the selection process, they say that the sales data that drives what books make the list and where they land within them is sent by stores, giant, tiny, and in between all across the country. It reflects the previous week's Sunday to Saturday sales period, which stores begin to report to us over the weekend. The article goes on to talk about how the staff do not read the books, so they don't know what's in them, which I can see how that helps to make the case that this is an impartial list, and as the team members says themselves, we aren't making value judgments, we go off the sales data. Do me a favor for the rest of this video and just keep in the back of your mind how strong the wording is on that to like just get across the message that their sole decision-making process comes down to only the sales data. The team never specifically says what sales data they look at, which, as they were saying before, is because they don't want people to be able to game the system and get their shit at the top of the list. But it is apparently no secret within the publishing industry that this is doable. So doable, in fact, that people have made a living out of it. From an Esquire article by Sophie Vershbo talking about how authors make it onto the New York Times list, she says that, according to the sources she spoke to, a company called Book Highlight is known for running these bestseller campaigns. Her source continues saying, as she understands it, an author will pay for X quantity of their own book, Book Highlight will then purchase the books from different retailers in low numbers, and they will be shipped to a Book Highlight distribution center. And I mean, it seems like it checks out. If you go to their website homepage, they show off 12 books to you, 9 of which are New York Times best-selling books. This whole thing sounds to me like what happened with the movie The Sound of Freedom. For that, there was a lot of ticket sales because of a system the distributor made called Pay It Forward. People were able to pay for movie tickets that somebody else could then claim to go and watch the movie. The difference between doing something like this for books is that a box of unsold books is a lot easier to not show to people than an empty cinema. I couldn't find the original video of that because it seems like the Libs of TikTok account which posted it, run by that turf bitch Chaya Ratchik, was banned. Just to be clear as well, like just as a side note, they're not bitches because they're women. I kiss my mother with this mouth. It's got nothing to do with that. They're bitches because they hate seeing people happy in a way that doesn't affect them in the slightest at all and still want to have a go. Like, I don't get it. Just shut up. If you're watching this and happen to disagree with me, 2 things. First off, please never watch a single piece of content I ever make or I am involved in again. And secondly, I fucking hate you and I wish nothing but the worst for you in life. So back to books. This practice of hiring a business to bulk buy your books to get onto the New York Times bestseller list is something that even the New York Times themselves seem to be aware of. If they suspect that a book's sales figures are being artificially inflated, instead of just not putting the book on the list because there's still a chance it's valid, it's hard to disprove the sales figures, they instead just put like a dagger icon next to the book when the list gets posted. Vershbow in her article claims that this happened with Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner's books when they were released. Just to pile on with what I was saying before, if your immediate response to hearing that was that that's fake news, what does it feel like to be so deep in there? I'm sure a libtard like me, there is something in there that is just like, I'm that deep into something, but like, this guy's a criminal. You know that, right? And he's running for president. Even though it's never been confirmed, Kathleen Schmidt, who is the president of a book publicity and marketing firm, says that she believes the New York Times' main data source are Amazon, ReaderLink, which is a book distributor, individually reporting stores, and BookScan, which is a major data provider for sales. But even if they were checking those sources, which from everything I've read, most people agree that that is more than likely what they're looking at, there still does look like something doesn't add up with the numbers. An anonymous source that spoke to Vershbow said that it's frustrating when you get the actual numbers of what every book on the list sold, and a book with lower numbers is higher on the list. You know it's because of connections or the New York Times preferring one read over another. Another person who spoke with Vershbow said that they've checked the data themselves and have seen that it doesn't always align with what the New York Times shows on their list. But this isn't the first time that somebody has tried to fact check the New York Times. In a Stanford study, Alan Sorensen, an assistant professor at Stanford, was interviewed about his review of the Times list. What he did was take what the best-selling books were over a 2-year period as reported by the New York Times and compared it to BookScan. What he found was that 109 books were not given the title of a New York Times bestseller, even though BookScan reported that they sold more copies than books that were featured. Separate to that, TheHustle.co compared the best-selling list from 2 sources, one being the New York Times and the other being USA Today, which, according to The Hustle, takes their data directly from BookScan. What it showed was that for the week of October 8th, 2023, 6 of the 10 best-selling books, as reported by BookScan, were not featured on the New York Times list. The 4 the New York Times featured are listed as the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 6th best-selling books for that week, when in actuality, based on BookScan being considered as the reliable source here, those books should be listed as 1st, 7th, 8th, and 5th. Immediately you think to yourself, if they know this data is incorrect, why are they presenting it as fact? The first thought that came to my head, which I'm guessing is the same for you, is that they've got to be making some kind of money off of the best-selling books, because otherwise, why bother lying? And a little detail I didn't pick up on until I went back to try and find if this was the case, was a small sentence underneath each list that says, when you purchase an independently ranked book through our site, we earn an affiliate commission. And look, I'll be honest, I don't know for certain what they mean when they call it a independently ranked book, but I would assume that it's the same way a tech channel on YouTube would link the product they're reviewing in the description of their video and have an affiliate link there. So in some way, yeah, they're making money off of misrepresenting data. To what degree that is, I don't know. I'm guessing that when you click buy and then it comes up with Amazon, it's like an Amazon affiliate link. I don't know that. Don't sue me. I am not sure. But if it says on the thing that like they're making money when you buy the book, they're making money by buying a book, which, as has been said before, the lists that they're giving you are not accurate. So they're misrepresenting data and profiting from it. That's kind of where I'm getting at. Now I know what you're thinking. How could they do that when they told us in that article that they aren't making value judgments and that they go off the sales data? And again, I know what you're thinking. Oh shit, I forgot I was supposed to remember that. It's fine. It's fine. I expected too much from you, I think, and that's the problem. But on that note, in 1983, William Blatty sued the New York Times for not including his book on the bestseller list. Blatty is the author of The Exorcist, and it got turned into a movie in 1973. So even without seeing the sales, I can imagine it probably would have sold well when it came out, considering that this was like the 3rd book in the series. What happened though was that the New York Times defense for not featuring the book as a bestseller was that, quote, the list was not mathematically objective, but rather was editorial content, meaning that, at least in 1983, they don't go off sales data and instead are making judgment calls. I love being lied to by big company. I think outside of the fact that the New York Times is a trusted source for what is best-selling, and they have at minimum once before admitted that they just pick and choose what goes on there, the thing that bothers me is that they've done studies into this. Being a New York Times bestseller can be a make or break for an author's career. In that Stanford paper, Sorensen Robinson says that appearing on the bestseller list for first-time author sales probably would increase by an impressive 57%. Not only that, but being a New York Times bestselling author can help someone when they're negotiating any future book deal they may sign. The publicity the list offers to new authors, there's no bigger marketing campaign you can do, especially when there are people that will make decisions on what book to buy based on what the New York Times has portrayed as a bestseller that week. When I said I wanted to do this video, it was because it just seems like every other book has that New York Times bestseller on it when you go into the shop. Like, if I have a look here, right? Like, this will immediately be one. Yeah, there you go. That's immediately a bestseller there. Okay, none of the other ones seem to be, but like, I don't read that much at all. Like, and by that I mean like, I've been reading maybe like a chapter every other day for like the past week now. That's the extent that I'm going to, and I've got a best-selling book here. It is kind of fucked that it's like I watched that movie, I got like halfway through that, then stopped, and then it's like only Goosebumps Horrorland I've read. Everything else is only the comic books that I have read. I'm getting too old to be able to say that. That's not good. You walk into a shop, you can admit it, like there's eye-catching, and there are people who will like only deem that book readable because it's a New York Times best-selling book. But now I just can't help but think about the books and the people that never got the recognition they deserve because one newspaper decided that, although it was a top 10 selling book that week, they didn't want to showcase it. Who would have thought that talking about people who think that other people shouldn't be allowed to be themselves would not be the most depressing part about this video? Thanks for watching. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to see more. You know that rundown. This is not your first YouTube video you're watching. If it is your first YouTube video you're watching, please tell me, because that would be really funny. Thank you for watching. Have a good one, and I'll see you later.